As I mentioned at the start of the show today, we have a wonderful guest joining us, Steve Moore. He's joined us on this show before in America Can We Talk. You obviously, most of you probably recognize his name. He is an economist. He was one of the chief advisors to President Trump in developing his amazingly wonderful economic plan for America. At this time, he's a distinguished visiting fellow at Heritage Foundation and the Project for Economic Growth, which is a great place for him to be. But he is obviously a nationally renowned economist, and I want to dive right in and talk with him about the impact of the coronavirus on our economy and moving forward. So, Steve Moore, welcome to America Can We Talk?
Hi, Debbie.
Hello, sir. Let me just jump right in and say, I want to do one positive thing before we talk about where we are. Only a few months ago, my husband and I happened to see you at a conference, and everyone at the conference was celebrating how well America was doing economically because President Trump was following along largely with the plan that was devised for him. So just as a background, before we dive into where we are, tell us just some highlights of how well the economy was doing before we begin to have to deal with the coronavirus.
Well, thanks again for having me. And it seems like 100 years ago, doesn't it? But it was only 4 or 5 weeks ago that we had the best economy, arguably in 50 years in this country. We had, a 3.5% unemployment rate, the lowest unemployment rate in half a century. We had wages growing for all income groups. We had 6.5 million surplus jobs. We had lowest inflation rate, lowest interest rates. It was just a beautiful picture. The Federal Reserve Board was saying that our economy was growing at 3 to 4%, a faster rate of growth than had ever happened during the Obama presidency. And so it was a perfect picture, and just bam, we ran into this wall with the coronavirus. The good news about that, it's important, by the way, that you bring that up, because it means no country in the world was more prepared, for the economic downturn than the United States was, because we had this cushion that Trump had put in place. And the other reason that's relevant to the debate today is because we know what works to make the economy grow. It's not welfare programs, it's not giveaways, it's not all of these loan programs. It's basically lower tax rates, less regulation on businesses, sound trade agreements that put America first, and promoting American energy. And those policies created this boom. And let's get back to that. And I'm really, you and I were talking off the air, I'm really more afraid now of the response to the coronavirus by our government than almost the virus itself. And look, I have 3 good friends who are sick from the virus. One is on a ventilator, so I'm not minimizing the devastation that this virus is causing. But I'm right now, frankly, more worried about the devastation to our way of life and our American economy.
Steve Moore, I could not agree with you more. And let's turn to talking about where we are right now. Just again, in big terms, in big picture terms, we've only been under the varying orders in government, whether it's state governors or mayors or cities, varying orders that have pretty much frozen our economy in place, frozen the workforce. What is the damage you can already see to our economy in just overarching terms?
Well, we're starting to see the devastation really escalate with each passing day. And we're going to see, we've already got a lot of businesses failing. I can't tell you how many calls I get every day from small businessmen and women who've spent their whole life building businesses. I mean, it's heartbreaking, frankly, to see in just a matter of weeks, great businesses, because they don't have revenues, and because the economy shut down by our government. And if they don't have revenues, that's like depriving someone of their oxygen supply. They die. And so we're seeing more bankruptcies. We're seeing vast increases in the unemployment rate. We're seeing people's life savings being vanquished and vanished by the decline in the stock market. So the costs, we have to really, what I've advised the president is you've got to calibrate the economic costs of the shutdown versus the health aspect. And I'm a big believer. If we do this in the right way, we can reopen our economy in a health sensitive way that keeps American workers safe to the fullest extent possible. I talked to Fred Smith, who's the FedEx CEO, one of the great American entrepreneurs of all time. They have 350,000 people working today. They're an essential business, and they're up and running in the United States. I asked him, how many people are actually getting sick? He said about 400 400 out of 350,000. That's one out of 1,000. I said, how are you doing it? He said, we're doing testing where we can. We're having gloves. We're using masks. We're using social distancing in the workplace. We are disinfecting everything. In other words, this idea that it's one or the other, Debbie, is wrong. We can have an economy that's functioning, that keeps workers safe, especially in essential businesses and essential factories, without shutting everything down. And we can do it in a way that, I believe that we can keep people safe.
I completely agree. One argument that people make who are very, very concerned about the spread of coronavirus, or number of people contracting COVID-19, is this idea, and I'm trying to get at helping people understand what you're saying, Steve, that we can do both. One fear people have is that or misunderstanding that causes them to resist the argument that we can bring America back to work, is a failure to appreciate how much damage is done long term by the longer our economy stays closed. And I think people don't see it in real life terms. They think it's like a carton of ice cream that you can, you stick it in the freezer. Oh, we can't access it for 3 or 4 or 6 months. Fine. We'll pull it out in 6 months. It'll be just like it was. But people, I think, need to help understanding how a long-term devastated economy, how long it takes to recover, and in real life terms, what that means to the average American. Can you address that?
Well, it's a great point. And, again, this is just such a hard thing to talk about because I'm an optimist. You've known me for a long time. I'm an optimist about America. I think we have incredible entrepreneurs and incredible workers, and we're going to get out of this. But the problem is every day that we wait, the economic damage gets, multiples worse. And you use the analogy of a carton of ice cream. I like to use the metaphor of a fine-tuned engine, because our economy is a fine-tuned engine. And we are, as Donald Trump has said many times in the last couple of years, we've become the envy of the world in terms of how well our economy has been performing. But I think a lot of the politicians in Washington think you can just keep the ignition on. You can just turn the ignition key after 3 months of a shutdown, and it's gonna just zoom down the highway. That's not true. Let me give you some examples. Businesses that are going bankrupt now, they have to sell their assets. They have to, lay off all of their workers. It's not as if you can just say, okay, you can start up again. They don't have any, they sell their patents, they sell their machinery, they sell everything they have to their creditors because they don't have any revenues. So those are the kinds of permanent damages that get done. I'm worried about the banking system. I have a friend who owns apartment buildings, and she has about, 2,000 units. Her income is the rent that people pay. Guess how many people are paying the rent now? Practically zero. So she has no income. So she can't pay the bank that lends her the money to run the business. I mean, you see what I'm saying? This cascades throughout the economy. We better get this thing up and running, or I really worry that there's going to be a kind of financial collapse in this country that will cause a lot of misery. And I'm so frustrated because this is being forced on us by government. By bad decisions by government. I think the president made a mistake in saying we're not going to get the economy up and running in certain places by Easter. We can do that. We can do it in a safe way. Even we're waiting to April 30 is dangerous. But I live in Virginia. I got to tell you, I live in Virginia, Debbie. Our idiot governor is saying we're going to keep the economy shut down till the middle of June. I mean, hey, governor, there's not going to be an economy to reopen in June if you do that.
Steve, I'm so glad you're saying every single one of the points you're making, because these are exactly the kind of things I've been trying to say. You can't just shut it all down and think it just sits there and is ready to. I love your analogy to starting an engine after it just is dissipating. This frightened as people are, concerned as they are, recognize we don't really have the COVID-19 under control. We don't have a vaccine yet. We don't have medication that completely solves a problem. It is also a human damage to America to let our economy, much as I'm sympathetic for everyone suffering and everyone fearful of COVID-19, we have to recognize the human cost to people if you have an economy collapse. And then I want to turn to the budget the bill that was passed in Congress, a $2.2 trillion stimulus. And I know that people in Congress felt like they had to do something. They had to signal, we understand you're concerned, we care. But I am concerned about the impact of that on people's thought about how they make their way in life, how that now that they're forced to stay home, the government can replace that. It's funny money to start with, but it actually in some ways almost impedes the ability of individuals in the economy to get going again, because we start thinking, oh, it's the government, don't worry, money doesn't come from my employer anymore, but it's okay, it comes from the government. Do you agree there's some damaging aspects to that $2.2 trillion bill?
Yes, I do. And I think you've said it well. And by the way, I was an advocate of providing some short-term relief for workers who have been unemployed because of this governmental action and this virus. And I was very much in favor of a loan program to make sure those businesses that I was talking about could get a bridge loan from the government and stay in business for the next couple of months, so that when we get the economy going, we get that V-shaped recovery that we all want to see. But what happened was this became a Christmas tree. When Pelosi got her hands on it, it morphed. I don't know how it happened from $1 trillion to $2 trillion. And by the way, you even stumbled on the trillion. I can't tell you how many times I see media say 2 billion. It's, because we don't even fathom the difference between 2 billion and $2 trillion. With $2 trillion, Debbie, we could have eliminated the entire income tax structure for an entire year on every business and worker in America. I mean, think about that. So, I'm frustrated by that bill, because I think what we're building now is a dependency culture again, dependency on government. And that's very, very rotten. It rots the American spirit. That's not the basis for what America is. It's going to get hard. It's going to be harder to get Americans to go back to work, because Nancy Pelosi, in all her wisdom, insisted on 4 months of 100% pay for people. Now, if we're out of this in 6 weeks, most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, want to go back on the job. There are a lot of people who would rather just sit in front of TV and get the free paycheck and not have to work. So we do a lot of stupid things. This bill is problematic. I think I worry that people aren't going to figure out how to get these loans. It's a very complicated process, and I think that could blow up in Trump's face. I hope I'm wrong about that. And now, Debbie, they're talking about another $2 trillion bill. A trillion, folks, trillion. A trillion is $1 million. We're talking about $4 trillion of spending in just a few months.
We are, and it's so alarming. And another related alarming aspect is every time Congress passes a spending bill, we have, in the expectation of some people in Washington, mainly the Democrat side, raise the expectation that this is the new threshold, the new baseline. And so when we have, and we also have people looking at this bill, which was supposed to be, I think your term was a bridge or whatever your term, the notion of temporary to get us through, but that isn't how the left is talking about these kind of bills. And I am concerned that as we move forward, whatever we're spending now will be talked about by the left as a baseline. Or if people on the right say we can't really spend that, we need to cut back, it'll be cutting money to the working American people will be the accusation against Republicans. So I'm concerned we've set an unreasonable, irrational threshold that the Democrats will try to hold us to. Do you share that concern?
Well, there was a lead article in the Wall Street Journal the other day called the Pelosi's blue state bailout. So she wants this next package to be used to just provide money to blue states that are already bankrupt because of their, crazy practices, their high taxes, and that kind of thing. So it's being used. What really concerns me is that the left is using this as an opportunity to basically pass the Bernie Sanders agenda. I mean, wouldn't it be ironic if the Bernie Sanders agenda passed under Donald Trump's presidency out of fear of this virus? We need to be so vigilant now as people who value our Constitution and our freedoms and our free enterprise system to rise up and speak out against out of control government at every level, at this local level. The Los Angeles mayor recently said he was going to shut off the water and the electric supply for any business that dare disobey his orders, like he's Joseph Stalin. And then you've got, the governors, like my governor Northam in Virginia, saying he's going to keep the economy shut down till June. And even in Washington, I love this president. I know he wants to do the right things. He's listening to the public health professionals, which is wise, but you have to calibrate. Mr. President, you have to calibrate the economic cost of what is happening to this country versus the health risks. And I know in the end he will do that. Thank God we don't have Joe Biden. Can you imagine if we had Joe Biden as president right now? I mean, how horrible it would be. So let's be smart about this. Let's keep people safe. in the best way we can with the testing and the screening and the health resources we need, and then get Americans who want to go back to work. We can't force Americans to go back to work if they don't want to. I have a couple of relatives, they're not going to come out of their cave for the next 2 months, but many, many millions of Americans want to get back on the job. They want to feed their families. They want to be productive. That's what America is about. You know, if we don't have an economy, we don't have a society. It's that simple.
You know, I think other times you've been in the show, Steve, we made the same point, but you're alluding to it again. The economy is not about money and greed and wealth. I mean, it includes wealth, of course, but the economy is about the exchange of, it is about the contributions people can make to their fellow citizens, producing goods and services and earning money that they have a sense of self-reliance and self-worth. The economy is about human comfort and people's human comfort, not just greed. I also want to mention—
Debbie, let me just add one thing to what you just said, because I've taken a lot of grief in the media for being so outspoken and saying we got to get the economy. Oh, Steve Moore just cares about the stock market. He just cares about rich people. He doesn't care about people dying. It's ridiculous. I mean, as I said, I've had several friends who've contracted coronavirus and gone through very tough times. So I'm not mitigating the severity of this. But to think about this, Debbie, who are the people who do you think are being hurt the most by this economic shutdown?
Workers, people who are
workers, not just workers, the lowest income people in our society. They're getting crushed. They're getting crushed. These are people who have worked hard for $15, $20 an hour. They're trying to make ends meet and feed their families and pay their medical bills and their rent. And now all of a sudden they're in an unemployment line and they can't make their ends meet. I feel those are the people who are going to be crushed by this. Look, I'm an upper middle income person. I can make it through this. I have the savings and the income to deal with this. I always laugh. All these university professors say, keep the economy shut down. They have tenure. They don't have to worry about their jobs. They're going to get paid one way or the other. It's the least among us that are being hurt the most.
Steve Moore, that is an excellent, excellent point. I also want to commend to our listeners something you wrote. You can find it on our website, americacanwetalk.org, on the homepage under shows, drop down list of links. It's an article by Steve Moore called Atlas is Shrugging. Obviously a play on Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand's book. She had a great quote with which you start the article. Government help to business is just as disastrous as government persecution. The only way a government can be of service to national prosperity is by keeping its hands off. And you spun off so many brilliant points from that idea that Ayn Rand had shared in her Atlas Shrugged. So I commend your writing and your advocacy. And I can tell you right here in America Can We Talk and all over the place in Texas, we are trying to spread the message you are spreading, which is getting the economy back is vital to the survival, the health, not just for money, but the prosperity, the wealth, the sense of comfort for the American family. So thank you for all your advocacy. Is there anything you want to leave with our listeners where they can go find more of what you write and what you have to say?
Thanks, Debbie. And let's, I hope everyone remains safe and healthy, but we've got to get our American engine up and running again as quickly as possible. That will, in the end, I really sincerely believe that in the end will save lives to do that, to get America's economy and our businesses flowing. And this is why everyone in the world wants to come to the United States, because we have the greatest economy in the history of the world. And let's get it up and running in the safest way possible.
Steve Moore, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me today, and thank you for all you're doing and advocating for the future security and strength of America. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, folks, I just simply cannot advocate enough. Read the article that I mentioned Steve Moore wrote. It's at our website. I'm sure it's you can find him on Heritage Foundation. He's there on their website, his writing, links to what he writes. He's just a gem and a gift to the American economy. And thanks so much to Steve Moore.